Sports is about winning. Seeding is about rankings.
They're now up to 2-2, but most importantly, 1-1 in league play.
From football to basketball, volleyball to wrestling, track and field, baseball, soccer, golf, and softball.
I could see him dropping 15 or 16 to avoid league matchups.
Blecha-tology does the math so you don't have to.
I look at them and I say, if things go right for them this year, they're going to stay.
Now, the master of mathematics, Ben Blecha.
The Blecha-tology week continues on the Eastern Plains Sports Network. Let's talk some 2A volleyball this year. And this classification, a lot of flux as we take a look at last year, because the defending state champions for Class 2A volleyball in the state of Colorado, they're the Simla Cubs. But Simla, because of enrollment, is now a 1A team. They've made the drop down because they dipped under the 100 count threshold that was the bottom end of the 2A classification coming into this year. So one of those rare situations when you have a new cycle from the Colorado High School Activities Association that there isn't a defending state champ in this classification. And to top that off, another one of the teams that made Saturday, Swink, they're also a 1A team because of that cutoff in the enrollment. So you lost two teams that were playing on the final day of the season out of Class 2A that drops down to 1A. And then you go, but they've also added some teams that made it to Saturday, because Marino, who was 1A and a semifinalist last year, Flatirons, who was a semifinalist last year, they've come up because of that enrollment count. For Marino, their head count did go over 100. For Flatirons Academy, they were hit by the 150% rule from private schools, charter schools, that kind of thing, where you've got to count 150% of your enrollment. So they're up. Same thing hit ECA, who out of Colorado Springs was a 1A state qualifier last year. They're now a 2A team. So it's really kind of challenging to pin down what exactly we're getting in Class 2A coming into this year, because typically when you have teams that move up or drop down, they're going to shuffle in the rankings. I've talked about it on Blecha-tology before. If a team is moving classification, if you're the number one team in the 1A classification, I'm probably going to put you at about 5 in the 2A classification coming in, just because of that move. But one of the biggest challenges with this bunch coming in is that ECA and Flatirons Academy and Marino all played a lot of 2A teams last year. Marino was the LPAA champs. They beat Sedgwick County. They beat Wiggins. This is a team that won that league title that featured some of the Class 2A teams and some of the 1A teams that are in the LPAA. So it's hard to kind of say that them moving up automatically drops them down in that spot. I think regardless, let's take a look at the Saturday 6 that is returning from Class 2A and is still in Class 2A this year. That's Sedgwick County, that's Wiggins, and that's Holyoke, from especially our area on the Eastern Plains Sports Network. Sedgwick County, they were in the championship game last year. They were the runners-up to Simla, battled their way after losing early in the state tournament all the way back to get to the championship game. Had they, I think one thing that is forgotten about by a lot of people, I know I'd forgotten about it until I started looking at it. Had they won the title last year, that would have been 3 titles in 4 years. They would be a 3A school this year. So you see that competitive balance rule that could have come into play in that play-up rule. They've got to replace Laney 9. 1,000 or more career kills and digs. That's a huge task. But you're bringing back Ryan Carlson. You're bringing back Darren 9. You're bringing back Piper Butenbach. You're bringing back the Rehnquist girl. You know, they've all really developed and developed on the biggest stage that has been Sedgwick County over the last couple of years. Their pedigree creates an expectation that they're going to win, and I think in this situation, that's a good thing. Not just their pedigree on the volleyball court. They've been a successful team on the basketball court as well, with the same coaches at the helm. Scott Dilly, the basketball coach on the girls' side, assists on the volleyball end of things. Alyssa Rehnquist is involved in their lives year-round athletically. So there is expectation in the success in that girls' sports I think is a good thing. But to break this down, since Blecha-tology is about numbers, let's talk about the numbers. You're looking at a team that, you want to earn 12 to 13 points per set. At this point early in the season, 15 is that elite number of the earned points. They're bringing back 7.5 earned points per set this season. So where are you going to find those extra 5 points early this season, knowing that things are going to develop? That's the biggest problem, because early in the season, you don't want to have to be reliant on those mistakes. So on paper, there's questions, largely because of the graduation of Laney 9. Now, Wiggins is another one of these Saturday 6 teams. They've been a perennial qualifier. They were a Saturday 6 team for not only last year, but about the last decade. This team has been in that position. So for them, it's never rebuild, it's always reload. The Tigers, you don't have to rebuild or reload much. Yes, you had a good senior class, but you bring back 4 of your top 5 attackers, you bring back 3 of your top 5 back row players, and you were down your libero last year due to injury, so you were developing young talent in that spot already. One question mark for the Wiggins Tigers is going to be in the setting regard. Callie Green, she was one of 6'2" setters, one of them, but she really had pretty hands. Their offense was a little bit higher caliber when she was out there. And the other question for Wiggins is, this team was now a Patriot League volleyball team. They have left the LPAA. In basketball, they're playing in that Patriot League where Yuma and Ray had played. They're now going to be playing the Eatons and the Sterlings and the Resurrection Christians and the Brush. That is their league now. So you've got teams that play in a 1A postseason, but largely in a 2A league. Well, now Wiggins is one of those that's playing in a 3A, 4A league and will be playing 2A in the postseason. That, I think, can benefit them. I don't know, because we are in a new year with Max Preps being the new number. There is no seating and selection index right now for the Colorado High School Activities Association. It is all the Max Preps ranking. So how that impacts things, you're obviously going to get benefited by all the big names that are in that Patriot League. But is that class up when you lose to a 4A team in your league play? Is that going to hurt them in the seating? I think on the court, they're going to be in a good spot, and they're coaching very experienced. They know how to get the job done. So I think Wiggins has a lot of look up numbers right now, because they bring back quite a few numbers, even though their number really isn't that much higher than Sedgwick County. They're like at 8 points a set returning right now, because you did lose a couple of key players, but I think you can fill some of those in. Holyoke is the third Saturday 6 team that's in a really interesting situation. They graduated a lot more body-wise than either Sedgwick County or Wiggins did last year. But they're still bringing back about the same amount of points. 6.9 points per set is their return on the Blecha-tology metric. And you're looking at 7, 5, and 8. That's not a lot to be back. Colglazer and Cleve, they're going to be hard to replace, because they were great attackers. They were great blockers all around in the statistical contribution. They really picked up a lot of numbers. But there's some pieces back. Rhea Sprague was the number 3 option last year for Holyoke as a freshman. Sometimes she was even the number 2. And she has the tools to step in and pick up a lot of the missing pieces from Cleve and Colglazer that Holyoke had. Where they're really going to get hurt, the Dragons is their setting. Belkrop kept their opponents on the heels. You could never figure out where she was setting the ball. It was really hard to get doubles in front of the hitters, especially when she was a back row setter. So how they're going to handle that, that's the early challenge. I've seen them this summer. They're now under the direction of Morgan Wilkening, who won a state title as a player at Fleming. She's been the assistant the last couple of years there. They really play like they like her as a coach. So I think that is good for Holyoke in that regard. There's a couple other area teams that from the 2A classification now in this 2026 year that were state qualifiers last year. Yuma is one of them. The Outlaws, they were the surprise team in 2A volleyball last year, and really in almost all the classifications. They came in as the 21 seed. They got to state knocking out a Lions team that was number 4 that on paper they had no business beating. And really, I can't, numbers-wise, this is still the thing, Blecha-tology and using these formulas. I cannot define Yuma's success last year because they were on paper way down from everybody else that was a qualifier, but they pushed teams to 5 at state. They beat Lions. They did some great things. So it's not always about the numbers, even though Blecha-tology is all about the numbers. So I can't really define what they were. You did graduate a couple of key pieces. One of the biggest questions, who replaces Lauren Gonzalez as the top offensive option and the top blocker? Who replaces Bailey Neiswanger as the setter? She hit some last year and she set. You've still got pieces. You have Berkeley Neiswanger, Hermosillo, Sheffield. There's pieces that can be there. On paper, the task is tall, but no taller than Sedgwick County, Wiggins, or Holyoke because they're still returning 6 points a set. And then you have Marino, who comes up from Class 1A. Their task is very tall because they graduated 2 college volleyball players in Jay Lynch and Jade Powell, Kaya Peel, who you didn't get back until she was just a libero following that basketball injury her junior year. But you're graduating between the 3 of them. You're graduating almost 17 points per set when you use the Blecha-tology formula, or when I use the Blecha-tology formula, and calculated, the points you earn from the natural hitting errors that come from the digs that Kaya Peel and Jay Lynch and Jay Powell provided, because they were all 6 players. Well, Peel was a libero last year, but she was on the floor for essentially 6 rotations in 2 different spots. You're graduating 8 kills a set, 15 digs a set, 2 blocks a set, 3 aces a set. That's a massive hole to fill. And then you factor in the move up, which I don't know, again, if it's as big of a piece for Marino right now, because they won that 2A league. They were the LPAA regular season champs last year. So the 5-spot drop that would normally happen by saying, hey, the number 1 seed in 1A, which was Marino last year, is now a 2A team. They probably are coming in 5 or 6. But then you're losing all of these graduating pieces. And from the little bit I've seen Marino, I don't have any official word, but I've not seen the full gamut of their players this summer. So maybe there's some injuries that you're dealing with, some residual, projects and whatever, that is going to create some challenges for them. They're going to be young regardless. But I think one of the things that gives Marino aid, even moving up to Class 2A, is that name across the front of the jersey. Marino carries weight. This is one of the most tradition-rich programs in the state of Colorado. I think there's only one school that has more state titles than them at this point in the history of Colorado. So that carries a lot of weight and should help, the young core and the young players, because they've got or young coaches. They've got new coaches at the helm of the program this year as well. Let's take a look at the class averages in Blecha-tology and then maybe talk about some of the rest of the state as we break down 2A volleyball on Blecha-tology on this Blecha-tology week. The average Class 2A team coming into this year returns 54% of their roster and 7.4 points per set. So a lot of the schools we just talked about, they're right along those average marks. Right now, 9 of the top 30 to end last year, when you shuffle everybody into their new classes and factor max preps into the case, 9 of the top 30 to end last year returned 2/3 of their roster, and 7 teams returned 10 or more points per set that were in the top 30. Dolores, Vale Christian, and ECA, who is also a 1A team coming up this year, they're the only teams that qualified for state last year that meet both standards of 67% returning and 10 or more points per set. They kind of lead that young squad returning. Dolores has everybody of substance back. Aubrey Wyatt, who scored from all 6 spots on the floor last year. The biggest challenge, even if their numbers aren't great for Dolores, is going to be the new ranking. They don't play the same familiar teams that these LPAA teams, the Patriot League teams. They did come across the mountain last year and play in the collegiate tournament. I'm not certain that that's on their schedule this year. I haven't seen Dolores's full schedule yet, but that familiarity is something that really carries a lot of weight in the Max Preps rankings from just the casual observation I've done. So not having some of those big names, how is that going to impact them? I think Dolores went into state maybe as the number 3 seed. I think that's where they were last year, but their max preps ranking had them at 6. So that weight is going to be there. ECA, kind of in that same boat, although they do play some 2A schools like Marino does. They bring their whole roster back of the team that qualified for 1A for state last year. But a team that comes in barely inside the top 10 in the 1A seeding, a 5-spot move back for me. This is a team that's still battling for a spot to potentially host, but that move up is, I think, going to be a factor. Some 2A returners, or one 2A returner from last year that was at state is Vale Christian. They were the 12 seed. They bring 13 points per set back. They surprised me with their competitive edge in the Coliseum last year. Max Preps is going to hurt them, though. Max Preps is a negative 1.7 was their ranking. I believe everybody else that qualified for state, with the exception of Yuma, was a positive, and I think Yuma was even higher on the negative side than that negative 1.7 last year, even though they had a losing record because of the tough schedule that they played. So that's going to hamper them with Max Preps being the only seeding factor, but you do bring back a lot from last year's team. And then Byers, they're one of the most perplexing cases in 2A that I wanted to make sure we mentioned here on our 2A volleyball Blecha-tology breakdown. The Bulldogs, they went 10-15. They were the 28th seed using the seasoning selection index, but they took, I think it was 4 teams that qualified for state last year to 5, just couldn't finish it off. They bring back 81% of the roster. Difficult schedule. They were higher than that 28 in the seeding and selection index. Finished them last year in the max preps, so I think they're a team that maybe you can keep an eye on as well. And then, of course, Lions, who was upset by Yuma in the regional round last year, entire roster back, 14 points a set, already locked in, play a really good schedule. Max preps looks upon them really kindly. The question mark for them is that 14 digs a set. That's what got them against Yuma. They couldn't get into long rallies, and so that's, I think, what hampered them. See if they can improve that. And then Highland, rinse and repeat the same thing I just said for Lions. They were the 19 seed, never really felt like they were state bound on paper, but in 2026 they were kind of building toward with everything that they brought back. Max Preps wasn't kind to them, though. Negative 3.3 in the Max Preps ranking, even with a 17-8 record. So their schedule didn't help them. They've got to have a better schedule there. And then Akron's the other intriguing piece here as well in the 2A Blecha-tology breakdown for volleyball, because Akron, like Marino, they're now a 2A team. They're interesting because they were super young last year. Molly O'Neill, one heck of an athlete. That's what it takes to win. Everybody's coming back, but Cashley Randall, who was their setter, she's now a McClave Cardinal. Family got jobs in the administration of that school system down there, so she's now down at McClave. Who's the setter? There's a new head coach. How are you going to move with all these pieces here? So I think that's the biggest question coming in. So to finalize our Class 2A volleyball Blecha-tology, let's talk the preseason top 25. 36 get into regionals, so more than the teams we talk about here are going to matter. I think there's a couple of groups, probably 4 groups of this top 25 ranking, and I'm not going to give you here's 1 through 25 in 2A, but I'm going to kind of put them in groups. The group 1 is the postseason is a definite, but they're probably not in the line to host. They're probably falling 16 to 25 in the rankings. Locally, I think Akron falls in here, and I think Burlington does as well. Burlington was the 13 seed, almost got to state when they went to Vale Christian for their regional. They had some holes to fill, questions abound, but I don't think you can rule them out on what they could be. They could be that Yuma team this year that comes in as a 19 and springs an upset on somebody and gets to state. Other non-area teams in this group: Honey, Byers, West Grand, Fowler, Meeker, Telluride, Monte Vista, and Rye. I think the hosting bubble is my second tier. This is going to be like 10 to 15, and remember, top 12 will host. Yuma, Holyoke, and Marino all fall into here. They have a lot to prove, but given the LPAA's history, given their pedigree, I think they belong here to start, and I think that they could, depending on the early part of the season, slide up into our next tier, which is hosting is the floor, but Saturday is the ceiling. You feel like these teams are locked in to hosting, but they also could be a team that could move up, or they could slide back in the hosting bubble. You're in this spot. This is 4 through 9. Nobody locally, I don't think, in there. ECA, Lions, Vale Christian, Ignacio, Highland. I think any of the teams in the hosting bubble could get there. The contenders from day one, though, for me, are Wiggins. They've proven time and time again that they belong. I wouldn't be surprised if they end up number 1 this year, especially playing that Patriot League schedule. I think Dolores belongs here with everything they brought back. The unknown is the only factor that can both be a positive and a negative. Not knowing who they're playing, not knowing how they play, could get some teams there. And then I think Sedgwick County definitely is in that contender from day one group as well, because the champs are gone. So if the champs are gone, my normal Blecha-tology rule is the champ's the champ until the champ is beat. Well, the champ isn't here, so we're going to give that start to the early spot to Sedgwick County as the team to be given the runner-up. That's a look at 2A Blecha-tology. It's all presented by Agricultural Accounting. I'm Ben Blecha.